Hello, guys, and welcome to the 11th episode of Insta live session of Women of the Subcontinent. And today we have a very, very special guest with us. And I can see people joining in. Welcome, all of you. So, we have a very, very special guest with us today. And she's none other than Bindu Subramaniam, who's a woman of many talents, and she's a singer, songwriter, an entrepreneur. She's an author. She works actively as a music educator, and I can't wait to call her in. I can already see her, so I'll just to join in a few minutes. Hi, Gauri, I can see you. Afi Bakshi has joined in. Okay.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you? So good to see you finally.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, so Bindu, how have you been? Thank you for doing this. I feel so honored you joined today.
I think it's amazing that you're doing this, Women of the Subcontinent. I think it's a very powerful thing to bring the girl gang together, and it's another
Yeah.
very powerful thing to bring the subcontinent and South Asia together. So thank you for doing this and thank you for having me on it.
Yes, it's my absolute pleasure to have you on board on this. So Bindu, you've been. I mean, I have been reading about you and all your achievements, and it explodes my mind how much you've achieved and how much you've done. And one very interesting thing that you are still working on is education, is on music education. We are going to extensively kind of talk about it. But first, I'm very, very curious to know about your background. And your father is a very, very renowned person and a legend himself. So tell me, the third generation, third generation prodigy that you are. So why don't you kind of give us a brief on that?
That's that's a really heavy word to toss around. I'm just a person who likes to make music. I come from a family of musicians, obviously, and so I think music has always been a part of our lives. My dad is Dr. Subramaniam, the violinist, and he's, of course, one of the greatest musicians on the planet. So when we grew up, my brothers and I, we always had music around us, and so that became a very integral part of our identities. And although I pursued different things in terms of education, I somehow at the back of my head, from the time I was in my late teens, felt that music needed to be a very important part of what I do.
Yeah. And was music something that was it your natural choice, or was there a kind of a pressure somewhere that, you have to pursue it? Was there something like that?
I think the kind of families that we come from, music is always a part of it. Whether you want to be a musician or not is a completely different thing, but it's important to have music be a part of your life. So from the time we were really small, all of us were kind of learning violin and piano and singing, and there was Carnatic music and Western classical music, and so it was always just an environment of music and music making. And I think when you're surrounded by really great artists, you set the bar at that level.
Yeah.
Having said that, I don't think our parents ever felt that it was important that we be musicians as a career. In fact, to the other extreme, my dad has always said that it's really important for us to have education, enough education, and what he qualifies as enough is really, according to me, too much. Uh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah. That was funny. Yeah. Yeah, but it's so interesting because I come from a Bengali household, and usually music is a part of growing up for us. Even if you're not a professional musician, you need to know something, at least the basic training of classical music, or Robindra Sangeet, as people take up
right,
in Bengal,
right.
or Kathak or Odissi or something. I mean, even I took up music like that because my father, I don't come from a musical background really, but my dad saw that I was inclined, and he put me onto classical training, Hindustani classical. But eventually, and his intention was not for me to kind of take it professionally like I've done it now. But it's so amazing to hear from you, especially because belong to a musical family that you, I mean, music was treated not like, for you, not like really a career option initially. It was more of another subject that you can grow up with in your life, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
So,
yeah, so we had the option of not choosing music. I think we all just chose it because at some point you realize that that's your calling. And I always feel that you should do music not because you want to do music, but because you don't see yourself doing anything else. There's a difference between saying, "Oh, I like music. I think I'll do this as a career," and saying that, this is what I need to be doing. This is my mission.
yeah. So did that happen for you? When did you think that, I need to go there, I need to go up on stage and perform?
Well, I was on stage as a kid, so I mean, we were touring and performing, and I guess that's part of the whole thing. But I never really thought of it as, okay, this is what I'm going to do when I grow up. This is going to be my career, my profession. Uh, and I always thought I was going to be a lawyer because I read, too many John Grisham books as a kid. So I kind of assumed that my future was going to be, in corporate law. And once I got into law school, I was like, oh no, this is not what I want to do. This is not what I'm passionate about. And then I was able to explore both my roots in terms of Indian classical music, which is what we learned at home, and the Western classical music that our dad kind of exposed us to, but also explore genres like pop because I realized that I identify a lot more with contemporary music, and I wanted to kind of follow an honest expression of that as well.
That's amazing. So what kind of music would you listen to at that point of time when you were growing up in terms of pop and Western music?
It's very random. I mean, you'd start with MS Subbulakshmi in the morning, and somewhere along the way it would become Mariah Carey, and then there was a point when Eminem was really important, and of
Wow.
course there was a little bit of Evanescence, and then there was Linkin Park, and so a lot of a lot of different styles of music. And I think that's what makes it cool, suddenly being able to listen to some African music or suddenly being able to listen to some Latin American music and then see how that resonates with you, even though the language is different, even though the stylistic expression is different, the instruments could be different. So how that
True,
works.
true, true. So, your first performance was when you were 12 on stage. Am I right?
I think that was my first formal performance. I was probably on stage in a more informal context earlier. But when I was 12 is when I had the opportunity to kind of be a soloist with a symphony orchestra in Norway. And the composition that my dad wrote was called the Astral Symphony. So that was pretty exciting because I was a soloist, but then we had an African kora player, we had a Baluchistani banjo player, and we had an Iranian santoor player and a kantala player from Finland, along with this, traditional Western classical orchestra of like 60 or 70 people. So it's always been about kind of pushing the boundaries of what music is supposed to be.
Amazing, amazing, and so much exposure. I'm already excited listening to all these things, and I mean, you had the exposures at such an
Absolutely.
young
I'm
age.
so grateful for that. And I think that that's what set me and my brother up to kind of be able to do different things now. It's the fact that we had access to a lot of stuff growing up and that
Absolutely.
there was no idea of, okay, this is not normal. We should only be doing one thing. So when you grow up in an environment where everything is acceptable and everything is normal, then you're constantly pushing the boundaries without being conscious of it.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is this, what is exciting also, I find that, I mean, you were encouraged to be more open in your mind. Uh, I mean, often with classical music comes a kind of a Puritan approach where,
Yeah, and a
where
closed-mindedness at some point.
yeah, uh,
Um,
a lot of time
yeah,
that happens. Yeah, so it's very interesting to know that your conditioning, your musical conditioning, was not something that would bound you into a smaller this thing, but it
yeah.
rather it opened you to the
It,
whole world. So
no,
you
and
could
in
choose
fact,
what you like.
yeah, no, in fact, I kind of went through this rebellious phase as a teenager where I was like, okay, the kind of music that my dad made, I wanted to do something different, right? We're all teenagers, we all need to rebel and kind of act out in different ways. And so I was like, you know what? I'm into jazz now. I'm into I'm into pop. I'm not into the kind of music that you make. And so I started listening to, you know, sort of like Frank Sinatra and Natalie Cole and Nat King Cole and Ella Fitzgerald and all of that.
Wow.
And my dad didn't say anything about it, but I felt like, okay, see, I'm doing something that's so different than what he was into, and this is my rebellion. And then I was digging through his record collection, like his vinyls, right? And then I see like Natalie Cole, I see Nat King Cole, all of these guys, and I'm like, no, my rebellion has failed. Like he's okay with this
He's
kind of music.
he's already that's so interesting. And yeah, but interestingly there's so much similarity between jazz and Carnatic classical music, I think,
Absolutely, absolutely.
instructor. So in a way you were actually kind of mentally bringing both the things together, maybe in your mind. The fusion act was already on. So I am not from a Carnatic background. I've learned Hindustani classical, but I did some fusion with Louis Banks. So I used to sing
He's amazing,
in his,
right?
yeah. So that's the first time. That's for the first time I got introduced, to Carnatic music and Carnatic classical, the fusion angle of Carnatic classical with jazz. Working with
Right.
him and with Ranjit Barot, that was my introduction. And I felt that my personal experience about Carnatic, although I know nothing about, my knowledge is very, very limited with regard to Carnatic, but I felt it was more structured and it matched jazz. I mean, the fusion was very seamless, is what I felt.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And working with legends like Louis Banks and Ranjit Barot is it's an experience in itself, right? What they bring and how they
Yeah,
bring things together. And
it's
I'd love to hear
amazing.
a little more about that.
Yeah, so actually I was pursuing. I love exploring music in all its forms. Just like you, I have been a rebel, and I, stepped out of my house to figure out. So after I came to Mumbai, because that's the music capital apparently, so I started recording and doing film stuff and ads, and eventually, but because I pursued classical music also, uh, I was invited to perform at a jazz festival in Switzerland. And once I went there and I performed with a big band, my entire you know uh, perception of music changed, and I felt that there's so much more you can do. I mean, it's just
Right.
not like there are things beyond. So, for people like me, I don't come from a musical family as such. So, I don't really have a guidance as to what you should listen to. I mean, my Guruji and all, they said, but those were a little Puritan.
Right, right.
He would say that you listen to everything, but uh, where I grew up, I was exposed to Indian classical and classical singers and Tagore songs and Qazi Nazrul Islam and the semi-classical sides of it. But when I
Yeah,
heard jazz, it completely changed. I was just something that I felt like, oh my God, this is something I need to explore. And I met so many musicians from around the world, and they introduced me to several, vocal styles of Africa and East European styles. And I felt, oh my God, this is exotic. I mean, and I found a very interesting similarity between those styles and Indian classical. I mean, there was
right.
some kind of a common uniformity I felt. So I wanted to learn more. So that's when I was searching for musicians I could work with, so that I could learn more. So that's how
That's really cool.
yeah. So why don't you tell me about, you have some amazing projects that you've done, why don't you tell me about that, your experiences, how did everything come with your brother and
Well,
the second
I
one?
have,
Yeah.
yeah, I have two bands that Ambi and I currently work with. One is SubraMania, which we started in 2014, which is sort of our space where we thought we could safely experiment with contemporary world music. So when we started, I had just come back from doing a master's in songwriting and music business from Berklee, and Ambi is obviously very heavily into classical music. So we started sort of trying to figure out uh, where that would come together in a way that was interesting to us, and where we could bring in the different influences that felt natural to us, whether it was an African rhythm or something else, or konakol. And so with SubraMania, we've really tried to make sure that we're not sitting in a set format, but whatever feels right for that particular song works. And we've done songs with just us in the band. We've collaborated with the flamenco flute legend Jorge Pardo.
Wow.
We're doing a lot of different kinds and styles of music, and to see what resonates with us. And we find that if you create music that's honest to yourself, you will find an audience that it resonates with. And I think that's really important. And sometimes I hear young musicians saying, like, what is the kind of music that I should make? Like, what is the right kind of music? I think the right kind of music is always music that feels honest to you. And the other project that I'm involved in, which is very close to my heart, is the Thayir Sadam Project. So in Tamil, Thayir Sadam means curd rice. So it's kind of the
Okay.
idea
Wow.
of curd
That's a
rice being
revelation. Okay.
of being like a comfort food, right? So it's traditional, but it's what feeds your soul. So we
Right.
kind of look at kind of making music that feeds our soul. And also sometimes Taishadam, calling somebody a Taishadam can be sort of derogatory, like, oh, he's a Taishadam. So we
Oh,
wanted to kind of take that back. Like it's a way of
right.
saying nerdy or something like that, right? So we wanted to own that. Like, yes, we are Taishadams, and it's something that we are proud of, and it's comfort food, and this is our authentic music. And there we've experimented a lot more with kind of electronica, uh, English pop and stuff like that. So it's Ambi, myself, and Mahesh Raghavan, the amazing, producer, iPad player, pianist, composer, and Akshay Anantapadmanabhan, who's just fantastic with the mridangam and konakol. And so then it's been a really nice space for us to experiment with different kinds of
Right.
music.
Awesome.
And
Awesome.
yeah, and I think both of them are kind of in different spaces in terms of the kind of music that we produce,
So
but
this
both
is
are
more
very close.
on the electronic space, and that the other one is
A
uh,
little more
more
acoustic.
more acoustic. So two different sounds
Yeah.
altogether. And you had a solo album as well, right? Which was nominated for GIMA.
Yes,
So,
that was like way back in 2011. And the funny thing about that is the day I got the first press of the CD was the day that I came home from the hospital with my daughter. Like, it's like the day that she was born. So like the
oh
album
wow,
came out, and then like it obviously you know how these things work, right? You get the music ready, and then it takes like 6 months or a year or even longer to get it out.
true.
And you think of your music as your baby. So by the time that one was out, my daughter was born too, and obviously there's no way tour with the newborn who's a few days old. Um, but yeah, so that was Surrender, and that was very pop and influenced by my time at Berklee, the kind of songs I was writing at that point, and that
So
sort of stuff.
what kind are you doing any musical projects, or what is on the pipeline, or what kind of music are you interested in at this particular point of time? What are
So
you
we're doing
listening to?
a few fun things, or what I think is fun. We just released a song called "At the Door" with the Thayir Sadam Project, and the idea was kind of to make it very cinematic. And we had actually shot the video right before lockdown happened, and the funny thing was the idea of "At the Door" is sort of this very post-apocalyptic, dark
Wow,
song. And when we wrote it, we had no idea that this was kind of the direction that the world was hurtling towards.
what a
So
coincidence! I mean, not a good coincidence, of course, but that's how life is. I mean, yeah, anything can
yeah.
happen. So then,
So maybe, yeah, so that's one song that we brought out. We are working on another song as part of SubraMania with Ambi and me and some other really great musicians. We've got Shashank, the flautist, on that track, and he's just phenomenal. We've got Gino Banks playing. We've got
oh
Varun
wow,
Murli from Swaratma on guitar, and it's Frijo on keyboard, and something that I'm really looking forward to releasing soon. I've also been collaborating with my dad a bit. We just released a song that was dedicated to doctors and frontline healthcare workers.
That's
And
amazing.
for me, it's been a lifelong dream to collaborate with Usha Uthup because she's just such a
Wow.
legend. So I was really lucky that I got to sing with her on that track. And then a couple more things. I mean, there's always something going on, right?
Something and such exciting things. My God, I'm already excited listening to all these things. I mean, and you're doing all of it yourselves. It's amazing. It's
I
pretty
need to know
amazing.
what
Yeah.
you're doing as well. I'm sure there are a lot of very exciting new
So
things happening.
there have been very interesting. So initially in the lockdown, when it started, I don't know. I'm very interested in harmonies somehow. I mean.
Right.
I'm hugely drawn to harmonies, and I try to kind of play around with it. So I was just making videos. I was just doing like 3-4 videos where I could sing, a 3-part harmony or a 4-part harmony on a. So I was
Right.
just generally experimenting and putting out videos and on Facebook. And what was interesting is so many people, musicians, take they took those songs and somebody played guitar, some were playing drums on it. I was such a beautiful feeling of everybody coming together, and they would just ask, I mean, online, ma'am, can I just use this? I said, yeah, go ahead.
No, I love
Times
it.
are such weird that we don't even know what's going to happen, and if it makes you happy, just go ahead. There's no copyright, it's just little music. So it was something that I felt that when you exchange things, it can kind of spread so much happiness and joy. And I think
Absolutely.
that's the need of the hour. And eventually, right now I'm extremely occupied with this project. It's more like a research work for me now. I initially started it with the aim of exchange, and I'd seen a lot of plight of female artists. I mean, from some of us who have been very privileged to do it from an area where we can still reach out to people, and we have the facilities with us, and we can easily do things. But there are so many musicians,
Yeah.
especially females. I think it's a little difficult sometimes. So I just wanted to connect and just talk. Probably that might give us, when you have a dialogue that is exchanged, there are some very beautiful things that come out of it. And
Absolutely. And
I have very positively experienced that, and I want to kind of, explore more on it. And I was delighted to meet you in this process and know everything that. I mean, obviously, I knew about your music part, but there is so much more to you that I was not aware of. So it has been an absolute. Delight. And the most interesting thing that I find in your, and congratulations on your PhD. That's a recent thing, I
thank you.
believe.
This is
Yeah.
what I mean about my dad feeling that we need to be overeducated in the family.
No, it's very important to be educated, and especially, I mean, you're doing such a great job. It's amazing. So, I want to talk about this at, I mean, very much in details. That how did you think that you are going to take up music education as a subject? I mean, what made you think that you would take up music education as a subject?
So I think in some sense, I've always felt that music education is important, right? If you want to pass something on, it needs to be done in the right way. In fact, my grandfather was a music teacher, so it's very interesting that being a teacher is something that goes back a few generations in our family. And in 2007, we started SaPa with the idea of sort of creating a home for global music in India, but also trying to nurture the next generation of performers and giving them access to different styles of music. So if you're a Carnatic violinist, you should still have access to Western classical singing or piano. And if you're, a mridangam player, maybe you should study songwriting too. So how do we create that interdisciplinarity with kids as young as 3. And then we started doing some research and we came up with the SaPa baby program, which is to kind of teach legitimate Indian classical music to really small kids, to babies. We started at 3 and now we work with kids that are younger than 3 as well. I think our youngest student on date is 1 year and 10 months. Because what we realized is, when people say people with children don't appreciate Indian classical music or idiotic things like that, it's not the music, it's the methodology that has to change. There's nothing wrong with the music. The music is great, and
That's very interesting.
I
Yeah.
think creating opportunities for kids to have access to music is a very powerful thing, because music, not only for the sake of preserving art and culture, but it's a really important thing developmentally, for you to find your sense of identity, for you to kind of explore your emotions, for social emotional learning, for growth mindset, for everything. I think music is a really important tool for every child. So after SaPa, we started looking at how we could bring music to more children, and not just children who want to be musicians, because I firmly believe that every child should have access to music education, high quality music education, not just the handful of people like you and me who want to be musicians. And there is this preconceived notion that you have to it has to be genetic, and you have to be from a family of musicians, and I don't think that's true at all. I think the benefits that you have coming from a cultured family or a family with music is that you have access to these things. But if we can make or create an environment where everybody can have access to these things, then our next generation of musicians can come from anywhere. So we started SaPa in schools in 2014 to really create a baseline of music education for all kids. So we teach them Indian classical music, we teach them folk music, we teach them different styles of Western music, and we also focus a lot on global music. So every year they'll have a different global music component. 1 year they can study African music in depth. 1 year they'll study the music of Australia
Wow.
and New Zealand. 1 year they study Latin American music, and kind of use those different styles of music to understand different cultures better, but also to connect back to what we've learned. So if you hear a Hebrew song, you'll be like, hey, that's in this Indian raga. So this is how I kind of connect things in my mind. Because
Yeah.
often another thing that you see is, like, if you're studying Indian music and you're playing the piano, often you're doing this in silos. So you're learning two different things and you're not quite
Right.
sure where or how they come together. Like, for you to be a classical singer and then also singing harmony, I'm sure that was such a fascinating journey, because
It's
straight up
absolutely.
front, yeah. So
And
it's not.
interesting. I'm so excited to hear this because I was not exposed to Western music as a child. So when I came here and I would sing in a choir or something for recordings. Initially, I've done that also, and that was when I was introduced to harmonies. And the first time I sang something in say from a third or a fifth, the basic ones. So I felt that sounded amazing when a
It's
musician is
magic,
playing
right?
those
When you don't
cards.
know what
Yeah,
it is,
it
it
was,
feels like magic.
it's your, it gives you certain kind of an emotional, it puts your mind in certain kind of an emotional motion, which like really touches your inner being. And essentially because Indian classical Hindustani, however I've learned it, it was pretty monophonic in nature. So I had no idea of how the sound would, how what my experience would be listening to singing along with instrument or three different voices like that. So it was fascinating, but I really regretted the fact that I did not have much knowledge about chords, because had I
Right.
known them, then I could have discovered very interesting harmonies. And so that's one of the primary reasons I became very, very interested in jazz. And I used to listen to a lot of musicians actually,
Right.
initially in I'm sure you must have, I mean, uh, you must be a pro at that. But for me,
No, not.
those were like very, very little, little steps. And yeah, and when I was doing it with Louis Banks, I mean, he would give me some very difficult, those unisons to sing in Sargam, and he would play the chords. Oh my God, those were like incredible. And Gino would take up some konokol and he would break and play that. I mean, that's something that I actually heard. I mean, it's a school for me, that entire this thing. So very, very, so what
Amazing.
I was saying is that you're introducing this learning process that even I went through at such a young age for people. I mean, it's pretty amazing that awareness will be there. Then they can choose what they.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's a lot of fun actually to be working with kids, because you're always, you know, developing methodology, and you're always trying to create something that kids find relevant or that they find interesting. And so since we're also dealing with kids, as I said, who don't necessarily want to be musicians, we're creating situations where we're linking music to mathematics, or we're linking music to science, physics, or even how do you link music to something as painful as loss or migration? Or how do you use music to build tolerance? How do you, you know, how do you get children to understand soft skill concepts, soft skills, what we refer to as 21st century skills, through music? Like, you can improve communication, you can improve critical thinking, you can do all of those things through music. And
okay, this is very
if
interesting for me. Why don't you elaborate a little bit on this? This the soft skill thing about music is very interesting to me. Please
so
elaborate.
Well, I'm a nerd, as you may have figured out by now with all the research and the PhD. I am definitely a nerd. So, what's very interesting to me is how the brain develops, and how children from a very young age, the neural pathways start developing, and how we, you know, how we process, manage information, and we build skills. And if we're looking at the skills that people say we need for the 21st century, it's things like communication, critical thinking, you know. And I think music gives you that, the self-confidence, it gives you that analytical skill. And there's a lot of research that's been done that shows that, you know, if kids are exposed to singing in different languages, for example,
Oh, really?
yeah, so we, oddly enough, we start losing the ability to learn language from the age of 6. So, and that's not because we can't say what we can't say the nuances of the languages. It's because we can't hear the nuances of the languages. So if you're listening to different types of music and you're singing it from the time you're really young, if you want to learn that language later, you have that benefit from music. Or for example, if you, I mean, people have done studies that show that, you know, if you're listening to music, your reading becomes more fluent, or, you know, you become boosted. I'm not saying that music is a pill to kind of make you smarter and everything, but I think there are real benefits to learning music. And if we can kind of codify that and bring that into education in a meaningful way, that it's not just, okay, how are we going to sing songs nicely in pitch? How can we use music to help children on the special needs spectrum?
That's
How can you
amazing.
use music to develop bonds with other people? Or how can you use music to make kids more empathetic, more compassionate? Like, we're teaching them the song We Shall Overcome in 3 different languages when they're in grade 1 and 2. And we're using that kind of as an example to tell them that, look, there is a power that music has to change things. You know, people go out onto the street, or they have gone out 50 years ago, and they've sung these songs, and they've been able to bring about a meaningful change. Or you sing about migration, we don't realize the pain that so many people go through while
Right.
leaving home. But maybe if you
Right.
sing the song, you can understand. Or if we're looking at people as different because the color of their skin is different, we teach them a lot of lullabies. This is an African lullaby, this is a Spanish lullaby, this is an Indian lullaby. And what is the thread that's running through all of this? You know, everywhere in the world, mothers love their children. Everywhere in the world, mothers sing to their children. So these are songs that we can learn. So that's kind of what we've been trying to do through SaPa in schools. And it's a learning process, because we just keep getting feedback from kids, and we want to see, you know, what they like, what they want more of. Sometimes when we'll go into a partner school. We work with like 30,000 kids now, but we'll still try to
Wow.
jump into a partner school once in a while and go see the kids. Like, if there was one song you could tell us to stop teaching, what would that be? And then, you know, it's really nice to actually get feedback on the ground.
So, one very interesting thing is coming to my mind. I mean, when I was very small and I was given poems to kind of learn by heart, sometimes I used to feel so, I mean, it was used to get so boring. So I would go to my mother and I would ask her, "Ma, I can't. So she would say that, why don't you sing? Why don't you sing it? Why don't you just sing like a person? I would say that, but there's no tune. So she would say, just make up a tune and just
Make
sing.
your own tune, right?
Yeah. So, and it would be a very fun activity. And I actually forgot about it. It's just like when as I'm talking to you, I'm kind of getting back those memories. And yeah, I would actually be interested and I would start looking at the poem from a different, probably, angle altogether. So it's quite an interesting thing. Another thing is this. Uh, in one of my earlier sessions, I had this very lovely friend of mine called Hania Aslam, who's both a Canadian and Pakistani citizen. Now she's a musician. So she was discussing about some world music stuff, and she said that in North Africa, there are and in some parts of Turkey, music is like a communal thing. I mean, people sing
Right.
together, you know. So that can be a very interesting experience, and it can connect. So I feel
Absolutely.
whatever you are doing, the kind of method that you've been using to kind of make music add more value to a human mind than just the pitch and the sur and how to sing it or riyaz kaise
But
karna hai.
and as artists, we see that every day. Another very close friend that we have in common is Shumi from Chirkut,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
that is just a perfect example of how music can build this community or this sisterhood among people whose
Amazing.
paths may not have crossed otherwise at all. Like Ambi and I were really fortunate to be in Dhaka a few years ago, and we met her and the boys from Chukut there, and it was just this immediate connection, and we felt like we were just a family. And it, and I think that that's a very, very powerful thing, that creation of community that happens through music. And then they came and visited us in Bangalore, and that was great. And so we've been sort of going back and forth. And then when she called me, I was like, yeah, this is exciting. I would love to meet somebody else, and kind of continue this sisterhood and help it grow, and be part of something as powerful as a
Yeah,
movement
it's
within
so
music.
amazing. And with Shumi, I met her once when I was performing with Mikal Hassan band in Dhaka, and Shumi and the entire band came to meet us, and that was the first time I met her. And then I had requested her to do this, and eventually, when we started speaking, there were so many things which were common. I mean, she belongs to the eastern part of Bengal, and I have been brought up in the like West Bengal, but
Right.
the life journey has been so much in common. So we kind of instantly connected, and there are some of the she sang a couple of folk songs, on the which were so enlightening for me, because I sing a lot of Sufi Punjabi Sufi poetry, and but she introduced me to some of these baul singers aesthetics from Bengal, which very interestingly matched, uh, whatever the Sufi saints were saying. So it's very strange that maybe the locations are different, but these people are actually saying the same thing. They are
Right.
talking about love. They're talking about their struggles. They're seeking relief from the Almighty, just to be kind and to help them. And eventually, I was discussing with another friend that, listen, all these folklores and this music, probably in Bengal, most of them they are so sweet because it's a land of rivers, and there's so much cyclones and these things happening. The people suffer.
Yeah.
I mean, the poor people, the farmers, the fishermen, they suffered, and they just sing songs in praise of the Lord or something, or of the Almighty, to just you know, help them get rid of the situation. So while talking to her about these things, there was such a fantastic connection, and I just felt that as musicians we must reach out to each other. I don't know why we kind of you know, live in a cocoon and we are so busy in our lives. Maybe
Well, you're
uh,
fixing that, so
so no, it was so great. But and what was even sweeter of her, very sweet of her, is she made a small logo, you know, which I was never thinking. I mean, never,
I
it never
saw that.
crossed my
It's
mind.
beautiful. Yeah,
She's so sweet. She designed it. She said that it's my small gift to you. I just want it to look nice. So, you know, the poster actually she made it for me. She said this is your sample. Look. So it's
wow.
amazing, and it's just not, and it's so healing, Bindu, for people like me, and I'm sure for other musicians who actually experience this sheer joy of connection and exchanging music and you know, the thoughts. And I'm very sure I want to talk about this also, that music is also uh, it has a healing quality. I mean, because
Sure.
nowadays I feel the way the world is you know, moving, we don't even know what is going to happen in like the next 50 years, right? And
Next 50 days, forget years.
next 50, yes, you're right. And you know, I was just listening to this interview of this Israeli historian. His name is Yuval Harari, I think.
Right,
Yuval Noah
right. I
Harari.
love his books. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was one in on one of his interviews in Google. He was asked by the interviewer that how do you think I should bring my children? I have two little girls.
Hmm.
What do you think I should teach them? One skill. So he said that we don't know where the world is heading to. So probably we should teach them, you know, empathy and emotional
Yeah,
intelligence. So,
absolutely.
I also want to ask you, how do you think that, because this basic thing is, I think, in the struggle of life and in the rat race, a lot of people are somewhere being, you know, away from that emotional intelligence part. How can music actually bring it back to their lives and connect them to their roots or that organic self thing? How do you think music can uh, help with that?
I think at some level it's really easy to suppress what you're feeling. It's really easy to kind of hide your emotions. And I think at some level it gets easier as you grow older, right? When you're a kid, you're much more expressive, but by the time you're inching towards adulthood, you're so worried about being correct and you're so worried about being appropriate that you somehow lose out on your authenticity and your honesty and what you're really feeling. So some of the exercises that we've been doing through music is with the aim of trying to get kids to connect with their emotions. Just something as simple as, if I play this song, what do you feel? Like it could be, you give them a whole sheet of emojis, because that's how kids relate these days, and say, what does this song make you feel like? And it's okay to feel that, and it's okay for different people to feel different things with the same song. And how do you stay in touch with that authentic version of yourself? Because if you're pushing down emotions and if you're bottling it up, at some point it's going to cause you trouble. So I think you're absolutely right. It's really important for us to connect with our emotional selves, to build our emotional intelligence or our social emotional intelligence, and kind of kind of stay in touch with that as we grow older.
Yeah, because I
And
felt even in this very unnatural situation where we are locked up at home, and I could just spend hours with music, probably because I'm introduced to it and I can gain pleasure and I can completely get into it, and it becomes like like an engagement for me. And I'm very sure that little children who have to stay there at home, I mean, there's no other way, and it must be really difficult for them. But with the introduction of an art form like this, which has multiple benefits, it can actually be very helpful for their
we're
grooming.
trying to say, even for like kids in underserved communities. We work a lot with kids in NGO schools, rural schools, government schools, where the sense of self-worth is not automatically there. So how do you use music to help young people build a sense of self-worth? Because if you're able to value yourself and see yourself as something other than just one of the teeming masses, then
Right.
you can start to aspire for something better. You can work hard towards something better. So I think there is a lot of opportunity through music. I think there's a lot of work to be done still to make music more accessible, and for to a large extent for people to realize that it's not just fluff. It's not just that this is our curricular stuff. This is the real stuff we have to educate, and you need some free periods in between. So throw in some PT, throw in some music. So that's kind of our crusade, if I may, trying to create positive experiences or to help educate people about the importance of music for all children.
Hmm. But tell me now that you mentioned that you've also been kind of taking it to probably underprivileged children. How do they respond? Because this is not something which is essential for them. They are really struggling for the basic. So how do they respond to music education there?
I think what's really great is that kids are kids. They may have had different experiences and they may have, but to some extent, kids in underserved communities come with less prejudice. They're open and they're excited. A lot of the schools that we work with in that sector are schools where children come to school because that's where they get meals.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
and if the school doesn't serve meals, then it makes more sense for the parents to send them out to work. So they come to school for the meals and they stay for and the education is sort of a byproduct. So when they have something like music that they have access to, it brings them a lot of joy and individuality. And we have had, in some cases, parents coming to us and saying, I sent my child to school because I want her to learn maths. What is she going to do by singing songs? You know, and I want better than this for my child. I want her to learn math so she can earn a livelihood. And of course, it is very important to learn math. But then you see the same parent over time realizing the kind of happiness and joy that the child has by engaging with music, or even the fact that focus and concentration increases when you're doing something like music. And doing music may even be a step towards being better at math. So what we found is we have to tailor make our content in the sense that maybe we'll do a little more regional languages. We'll do we teach in Kannada or Tamil or English or whatever language the students speak, but overall our methodology doesn't change. The quality of the program we deliver doesn't change. What we're doing, our ambition, everything is very similar.
That's that's amazing, and it gives me a lot of hope for everyone. I mean, music has to reach everyone. I mean, so then we can build up a larger community of at least of music appreciation, also good music appreciation. So that's very important.
And
I
when
don't know
you're
how.
next in Bangalore, I'm going to drag you to one of our schools. You should come and see.
Yes, I would love to. I would love to actually. I'd love to like come and meet the children and see how it's being done. So Bindu, I can't let you go before I hear a little from you. I need to hear
Sure.
your beautiful voice. Yeah, please sing
What
some.
shall I sing? I will sing. Um, I'll sing a song, part of a song called "Days in the Sun," which is the first song that Ambi and I wrote together as part of SubraMania.
Amazing.
And it goes like this: I'd give all my days in the sun to stand with you in the rain. I'd give all my days in the sun to help me feel your pain. I'd give all my days in the sun to see you once again. See you once again.
Amazing. You write the songs and you sing yourself.
I do. I identify as a lyric writer, so yeah.
Wow. And how do you think Berklee College of Music, the education there, helped you?
I think they have a tremendous way of helping you build a toolkit. Because I mean, when we think of creative arts, uh, there's a sort of perception that you're born with it, and I guess a lot of talent or whatever you call it is inbuilt, but it's also really important to refine your skills and build your toolkit, which you know as a classical musician, right? How important it is to have that structure. So I think Berklee has really figured out how to do that in a powerful way to give you the right structure.
That's great. And Bindu, do you have any plans to take your curriculum or the way you are training kids outside Karnataka at the moment? Do you have any plans in future to
We
kind
are
of increase?
actually kind of inching out of Karnataka. We have a SaPa center in Mumbai. We are teaching in schools in Hyderabad. We're teaching in schools in Chennai. We have a couple in like Coimbatore and cities like that. So we are working on getting out of there. I think we were lazy when we started. We wanted everything in Bangalore because it's driving distance from home. But we are slowly
Because
building and
you
moving.
have an amazing perception about music, especially since you've studied it and you've gone so in depth into it. I feel that if every little children is introduced to this basic methodology, it'll build a lot more, uh, other than singing also, and it'll shape our little children. I mean, maybe to be better citizens and to be better humans. So
Right.
the
Let's
more
do
it,
it.
yeah. So it's important, I think. Something you need to come up with, which becomes like a compulsory thing for educational institutions all over, and it can just be so amazing. So
I
you know
hope so. With your good
yeah.
wishes, let's do this together.
Yes, let's do it. And Bindu, thank you so much for your time. It's such a pleasure for me and such an honor for me to have you
Such a
today.
joy to chat with you.
Yeah, and it's too little time to cover your whole journey. So probably we'll do another session with you. We have to later on. But thank
Lovely.
you so much for
Take care.
the next session. We'll listen to you. We'll listen much more of your music. Yeah, today we were
Take
just
care.
talking. Yeah, bye.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody who tuned in as well. Good night.
Good night. Good night.